All right, we're a couple of minutes past the hour, so I suppose we can go ahead and begin. Thank you for joining us again this afternoon. Now it's going to be something a little bit different where, we've spoken about Ancare products so far this week, but today I wanted to talk to you about something else that's near and dear to my heart. I wanted to talk to you about outreach. Now, this is a tremendously important topic in today's society, because I don't know if you've noticed, but it seems that lately, society has kind of been on this anti-science kick. It's like they absolutely ignore all this stuff that is provable. I was literally on Facebook half an hour ago arguing with someone who was justifying whatever she wanted to say by her opinion. But here's all the science to prove it wrong. And she didn't care, because that is where we are nowadays. People have this thing that their opinions matter as much as actual provable facts. Now listen, you're welcome to your opinion on all kinds of things. You have an opinion about who you're going to be voting for next week, I would think. I know the right answer to that, but it's not a scientific fact. You can have an opinion about whether or not this shirt really goes with these shoes. That's an opinion. Opinions are great, but opinions are not facts. How far does this really go? Well, I know people who claim that anthropogenic climate change is not a real thing. That means that global warming caused by man is not real. That's what people claim. Yet all the climate scientists, the ones who really matter, are absolutely in agreement that climate change is happening, and it's because of what man has done. I know lots of people, including probably some people who are in this meeting right now, who probably feel like genetically modified foods are a bad thing. But if you look at the science behind it, there's nothing wrong with GMO foods. There's nothing wrong with GMO products. They're the only foods that are actually tested. Scientifically speaking, they're fine. If you guys follow me at all on Facebook or anything, you're gonna know I kind of have a pet peeve with this group over here, the anti-vaxxers. They are ubiquitous, they are everywhere, and you're running into all these arguments against vaccines. But the science on vaccines, regardless of people's opinion, is valid. And it even goes so far as this. Yes, I have met real-life flat earthers. They are absolutely convinced that the earth is surrounded by an ice wall. I mean, hey, the sun is round, the moon is round. What are the chances of getting 3 out of 3, right? That's not going to happen. Yet this is where people are. So I feel that since we work in a scientific field, it's almost our job to go ahead and try to communicate science in general to people. And we can specifically talk about what it is that we do. Now, I can tell you that that isn't the way that it always was. I started working in the field way back in 1984. Now, I know for a lot of you people, you weren't even born yet. And yet I was there. I literally started fresh out of high school, and it was a summer job, and I worked right up here on the 14th floor of the McIntyre Medical Building at McGill University. And it was a great job. I really loved it. What was very cool about it is that I got the job because my grandfather was the facility manager. A little bit of nepotism here and there. It's not a bad thing, right? I'm sure Amanda will agree with that. A little bit of nepotism is just fine. So I got that job, and one of the first things that my grandfather told me is that, don't tell people what we do. Okay, so what I do as a good employee and good grandson, I didn't tell people what I did. And for a long time, I didn't tell people what we did. Well, okay, maybe when I was single, a couple of times I'd get there in the bars and I'd meet a young woman, and I'd actually tell her that I was a pilot. Yeah, because, I pick the shit up off the floor and I'd pile it into the bin. So, but for the most part, I didn't tell people what I did. That kind of changed though eventually. You see, one day there was a movie being filmed in Montreal, and they rented the surgical suite up in the McIntyre building in the animal facility. And late one Friday night, the whole film crew is in there. Now, you know how it is in animal facilities at night, right? It's kind of quiet, someone makes a noise, and then what happens? you start hearing the dogs bark down the hallway. The pigs start rooting around. And if you have primates, they're going to start thumping on their cages, right? That's exactly what happened. And the film crew was saying, what, you actually have animals here? Oh my God, they were so upset and offended by it. So my grandfather happened to say to them, does anyone here have a pacemaker? And one guy, a cameraman, he actually raised his hand and said, yeah, actually, I had one put in last year. It saved my life. And my grandfather said to him, I worked on the team that helped to develop the pacemaker. It's thanks to the work that our team did with dogs that you're here today. And that had a huge impact on everyone who's there in the room. They suddenly realized, oh, wait a minute, maybe this isn't what I thought it was. And that's when I kind of took it on and I realized that, hey, you know what? We should be telling people what we do. We need to embrace it. We need to let people know because they don't know otherwise. We need to talk to people about what we do. But this was back somewhere around 1987, and I've been in the field since then, right? So I've been in this field for a long, long time. And I haven't always had the opportunity to really embrace this ethos. I did try a few years ago. I went to this conference on, it was a conference on video for business, and it took place down in Boston, and you can see me, I'm sitting right here, that's me, at this conference in Boston, and I got ready for it, okay? I said to myself, now is my opportunity to really tell people, when you sit down for lunch, exactly like what we're doing here, to tell people what I do. Because you know what's gonna happen, right? It's gonna go around from person to person. What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? And it started just to my right over here. Started with that person. What do you do? And it started going around the table, and I was getting excited. I was getting ready for to tell people, I work in laboratory animal research. And then it got to this fellow right here, right next to me. He worked in porn. And for some reason, when you're discussing video and you run into the person who works in the porn industry, the conversation stopped right there. I never really got my chance to really embrace this attitude of telling people that I work in laboratory animal research. And it was a shame, it was a missed opportunity. But it doesn't mean that I haven't done it other times. And what I really want to concentrate on today is, what do you tell people when you start that type of conversation and tell them that you work in laboratory animal research? The first thing I've noticed is that most people will say to me, I'm fine with using it for medicine, but I really hate the idea of using animals for cosmetic research. Oh, why do they test all the cosmetics on animals? You know what I say to that? I agree. And the reality is that cosmetics are almost never tested on animals anymore, and they haven't been for a long, long time. I don't think I've ever worked in a facility where they've done cosmetic testing. Yes, there has been some testing in some clinical research organizations on new ingredients, not new products, new ingredients over the years. But for the most part, it just doesn't happen anymore. There's only one country in the world that still requires testing on animals for cosmetics. That's China. That's only for cosmetics that are imported where the manufacturer does not meet their good laboratory practices requirements. Those are the ones where they still test on animals. Otherwise, it just doesn't happen. So when people say that they don't like testing of cosmetics on animals, great, because it doesn't happen. Once they realize that, I see that we tend to get three main questions. Do we still need to use animals? What kinds of animals are used? And are they well cared for? Personally, I think that those are great questions because if I didn't know, they are exactly the same questions that I would have. So let's take a look at those. Do we still need to be using animals? Well, the first thing I'll tell people about then is I'll discuss this idea of the 3 R's. You guys know the 3 R's, right? You know them in and out. Reduce, refine, replace. You can say exactly what each one of them is and how it's actually applicable in our field. But you know it, they don't. Tell people about the concept of the 3 R's because they're already thinking about things like organs on a chip and computer modeling. So they want to know about that replacement aspect of it. Tell them all of those things. But from there, we get to back it up and say, well, organs on a chip are fantastic. They really are. And I'm sure a lot of you have already seen in some of your protocols where some animal usage is being replaced by these great organs on a chip. It's fantastic. But you can't replace the entire animal yet. And the same holds true with with computer modeling. This is a C. elegans nematode. It is the most basic animal with a brain, and it is the best understood animal in all of research, in all of biomedical medicine. It has just over 1,000 neurons, and just over 1,000 cells and 312 neurons. Back in 2014, this project called Open Worm launched, and their goal was to model on a computer this simplest of all animals. They got all kinds of crowdsourced funding for this. They've been working on it ever since, and yet they haven't done it. So we are still not at the point where we can make a computer-generated, a computer-modeled nematode. So we certainly can't do it yet for higher sourced animals. It may come about one day, I hope it does, but until then, we can't replace animals with computer models. It also doesn't help with this type of thing. This is what's known as a ghost heart. Now, if you take a look at it, it looks like a heart. This is actually a pig's heart here. But it looks kind of weird, doesn't it? Because where's all the heart in this heart? So a ghost heart has had all of the cells stripped away from it. And all that's left behind is the connective tissue, the collagen. It's essentially a framework for building a new heart. This is work that's taking place down at the Texas Heart Institute. And what they will do is they take these hearts and they cascade stem cells over them, not heart cells, stem cells, which then evolve to heart cells. They put it into a bioreactor and you essentially grow a new heart. Now think about this. This is a pig heart. Pig hearts and human hearts are incredibly similar. You could take this framework, you could reverse engineer epithelial skin cells into stem cells, cascade them over that matrix, and essentially grow yourself a new heart. Now, we're still a few years away from doing that type of thing, but it's theoretically possible, and it's being worked on, and it might just come about one day, hopefully, because do you know what the leading cause is of death in the world today? It's heart disease. So this particular change will hopefully come about thanks to laboratory animal research. So can we stop using animals? Not yet. Maybe one day, but we aren't there yet. Then people will ask, what are the animals used? Now, what are they thinking with this? They're thinking about exactly what the animal rights groups have told them for all this time, aren't they? That's what they see all the time. They see the people out there in the dog costumes and the cat fur and all these different things. That's what they think of. So for that, instead, I will turn to the actual numbers. Now, these numbers are based off of the Canadian Council on Animal Care. I do that for two reasons. First of all, I'm Canadian. Secondly, because in the United States, you guys don't count, you don't count rats, you don't count fish, you don't count mice. There's a bunch of animals that are not covered by APHIS. So as a result, you don't really have solid numbers on them. But we do count them in other areas. 21.2% of all animals used are fish. 38.3% are mice. That means that almost 60% of the animals used in research are fish and mice. I know vegetarians, or people who claim to be vegetarians, and they eat fish. And these same people, they'll call an exterminator if they get a mouse in their house. So that is the large bulk of the animals used. 29.9% are birds and other farm animals. 9.8% are other rodents. By the way, the birds and farm animals, that's also where all the other exotic species are grouped into there. What you're left with are 0.8%. In Canada, 0.8% of all the animals used are dogs, cats, and non-human primates. That's it. And don't think that Canada is unusual. If anything, Canada is a little bit high in that ratio. France, 0.46%. Canada, 0.8%. Italy, 0.18% of all animals used are dogs, cats, and NHPs. Netherlands, 0.25%, and the UK is 0.225% of all animals used are dogs, cats, and non-human primates. So why does PETA do stuff like this? Why do the White Coat Waste Project put out ads like this? You guys might remember this. This is from early last year, 2019. So actually that was about 10,000 years ago. But even still, this was put out in 2019 early, where the White Coast Waste Project very effectively caused a shutdown of a lab in Beltsville, Maryland. And this was the only lab in the world that was able to produce the toxoplasmosis bacterium. Tox kills thousands of people every year, blinds tens of thousands. It's a real problem. And this is the only lab in the world that was able to produce this bacterium, this parasite. And they got it shut down. Now, yes, if you read the caption up here from CBN News, which is a left-wing, ultra-conservative, sorry, they're they're right-wing. I was looking at something else. Anyways, yeah, no, they are right-wing, conspiracy theory, pseudoscience. That is actually how their media bias fact check goes. But they say killed and incinerated before they're 3 months old. Well, yes, the animals were euthanized. They used under 100 cats per year. But to get these very important parasites to test on, it wasn't a huge use. And of course, we would rather not see them being used at all. But it was the only way to do it. And they got them shut down. We're really fortunate, though. About 6 months later, Dr. Laura Knoll from the University of Wisconsin-Madison came out with a technology that actually allowed you to reproduce the toxoplasmosis in mice. An incredible example right here of replacement. She was able to replace the cats with a lower order animal. And that was great. Yet, funnily enough, PETA still targets University of Wisconsin for other things. And they don't seem to realize that the research needs to continue if we're going to make any of the advancements and make any of the changes that they want us to do. And even look here, this is PETA protesting in the UK about the use of primates. Do you remember the numbers from the UK that I mentioned before? 0.225% of all animals used in the UK are primates. Yet this is the one that they choose to go out in front of the public with and cast aspersions on laboratory animal research. Then you also have some issues where they take very good news and blow it out of proportion, take it really in as inappropriate a way as possible. COVID-19. One of the first vaccines to enter trials was this one from Moderna. It was a messenger RNA vaccine, new type of vaccine. No one had never been made before using messenger RNA. And yes, it's true, it was put out into trials, into phase 1 clinical trials, before animal testing was done on it. That is true. So it was taken and pushed out there that the vaccine was made available before knowing how well it worked in animals. But this is important because you have to remember that we didn't really have a model yet. We had just isolated the virus, and no one was really doing much testing on the virus itself yet, but they were able to develop this vaccine. So the testing that they sent it out for was phase 1 and phase 2, which is safety testing. There's no reason to not go ahead and proceed along those lines. Yet PETA went ahead and referred to it as pointless animal tests. And the animal tests are not pointless. As a matter of fact, the animal tests still took place. They did it concurrently with the phase 1 and phase 2. So phase 1 and phase 2 were already combined. They put the phase 0, the preclinical studies, going on concurrently. So PETA just completely blew what was really happening to fit their agenda. I think I kind of went off track there a little bit though, even with this. The important thing is what kinds of animals are used. Let people know that for the most part, it's mice and fish. For a large portion, it's mice and fish. And how we try to reduce the dogs, the cats, and the non-human primates because we love those animals too. And this is important to all of us, that we use the appropriate model, the lowest order of animal possible whenever we can. Are the animals well cared for? When we start just talking about this, I like to start things up at the very top and tell people about the principal investigators. Okay, maybe this isn't quite fair, it isn't quite true. Principal investigators aren't normally tied up on a gurney wearing a hockey mask. No, they aren't. They're actually loose. You can run into them in places. But just like Hannibal Lecter, if you're careful and you do it with respect, you can approach them and actually have a conversation. Okay, even still, I'm sorry, I'm not meaning to pick on PIs. I actually have friends who are PIs. Well, at least I hope they think that I'm a friend. I'm not so sure after this. But tell them about PIs, because a lot of people have this assumption that scientists are all these mad scientists cackling away in a laboratory, right? Even if you want to accept that scientists don't have the animal's best interest in heart, which, by the way, is not true. What is important to them, unquestionably? Well, I'll say two things. Valid science and money. They only get so many research dollars. They have to make sure that they're effectively used, right? How do you get this oh so important data and have it cost you as little as possible? You do it by taking good care of your animals. You don't get good science if the animals are not well cared for. So explain to them how even the PI has interest in making sure that the animals are effectively, appropriately cared for. Then tell them about oversight. Think about all the different organizations that we fall subject to in this field. Here in Canada, we have the Canadian Council on Animal Care. You guys have the USDA, the FDA. AALAS, of course, is all over the place. Plus, you have your own institutional bodies to think of. There's all kinds of oversight that's being offered all the time to make sure that not anything that people want to do is what's taking place. Because remember I mentioned that cackling researcher that's doing God knows what? Or how many times have you seen in a movie the way that they house animals and what they're doing to research animals and that? And it is so wrong. It's so not what happens at all. Let people know that there are rules and that there is oversight. Tell them about the whole idea of the IACUC committee. Most people have no idea that IACUC even exists. Explain to them the review process. Tell them about the different positions on these committees. Especially tell them about the community representative. Because I guarantee you that people don't realize that there's actually lay people who get to decide what science takes place in a research institute. This is huge information for them. So tell them about that. And then best of all, tell them about your passion for animals, about your coworkers, and how you love spending time with these animals. I mean, doing this type of thing, I used to do that, get down on the floor with their dogs, get down with a bunch of rats. I've got a rat up here in my office, and she is an incredible pet. She's an incredibly intelligent animal that I just love spending time with. Tell people about your passion for animals. No one has gotten into this field because you hate animals and you want to torture them. Of course not. You got into this field because you love animals. Let people know that. Let people see that. When they see that in you, they will come to realize that there's no way that someone like you is going to be working in a field that is torturing animals, because there's no way that you would stand for that type of thing. And even though those are the questions that I'm most often asked, the truth is, it's not the question I enjoy answering the most. That question is, what can be cured? And rather than going through a whole list of diseases and conditions where there's now treatments and medications and there's always these new announcements that are coming out, rather than talking about all of those, I like to talk about just one disease. I'll bet that everyone out there has somehow had their life touched by cancer. You know someone, you have a family member, there's something, you've had it yourself possibly. We all know the potentially devastating effects of cancer. And rather than talking about all the really cool animal models out there and all the new technologies, viral oncology is huge. I love that. I think it's fascinating. But rather than talking about all of that, I talk about this one particular model. Isn't he something? Here's a face that only a mother could love, right? This is a naked mole rat, and these are incredibly fascinating little creatures. Look at these huge teeth that he has, right? Well, the teeth aren't really huge. It's just that they're outside of his lips. So his mouth is actually closed behind there and the teeth come out in front. That means that he can keep his mouth closed while he goes ahead and chews and makes his tunnels underground. He spends almost his entire life underground, as you can tell by these tiny little eyes up here. They barely see anything. And his skin actually is like, it oozes an oil. It's very slippery skin. It's very loose. It lets them work around all through these little crevices and everything as they build these huge networks of tunnels. And I mean huge networks of tunnels, because these guys, about the size of a hamster, live up to 30 years. Now, my little girl over here, my little pet rat Sugar, she's about 2.5 years old almost, which means that she's quite geriatric. Could you imagine having a 30-year-old rodent? This is amazing. And why do these guys live so long? Well, a big part of it is because they are immune to cancer. And back in 2015, thanks to laboratory animal research, they found out why they're immune to cancer. It turns out that they produce a high molecular mass hyaluronic. Now, hyaluronic is something you hear tossed around in cosmetic commercials all the time, but this high molecular mass version actually makes them immune to cancer. It's pretty much throughout the body. You find it in the eyes, in the joints, in the skin, everywhere. And this would potentially mean that one day, a diagnosis of almost any type of cancer, and you have to remember, cancer is not a single disease, it's a family of diseases, right? But a diagnosis of cancer could mean gene therapy to make you produce the same type of high molecular mass hyaluronic and get cured from cancer. It's only one potential cure for cancer that's in the development. But isn't this amazing? We wouldn't have gotten there if not for laboratory animal research. And this is why we have to realize that it's almost our job to point out to people that whenever they run for a cure, whenever they dump a bucket of ice, whenever they pin on a pink ribbon, they already are supporting laboratory animal research, but maybe they just don't quite realize it. People talk about this all the time. Oh, well, you know, I have a pain here. Did I take that? Did you do this other thing? This is all thanks to laboratory animal research. Most people just don't do it, don't realize it. Now, the fact is that we have a bit of an opportunity, and it's an unfortunate opportunity, but it's real with this pandemic that's going on right now. We have an opportunity to start a conversation with people. Because it seems that up until a few months ago, no one knew how to wash their hands properly. Am I the only one who was amazed by that? It's been over 20 years since I've worked actively in a facility, yet I am still in a habit of washing my hands probably a dozen times a day, and yet no one else seems to know how to do it. We are able now to teach people how to wash their hands properly because we can come in as a professional. And I'm just going to very quickly ask people to go like this because everyone has frozen on my screen and I can't see anyone. I'm worried that maybe something happened here. Can someone chime in?
We can still hear you, Gordon.
You could still hear me. Oh, thank goodness. Can you see me?
And I can see you, so it might be just on your end.
Thank goodness. I've been having internet problems, so you never know how these things might go. Thank you, Sarah. Anyway, so we can use something as simple as hand washing as a way to open the conversation. And we can talk to people about masks. Oh my goodness. How many people here are dying because you go out into the store and you see how people are wearing masks? Chances are most of you out here have been properly trained on how to properly wear a mask. So we can use that as a way to open the conversation. Let people know, hey, you know what? I work in a research facility. We have to wear masks all the time. I've been trained on how to wear them, and you really do need to have it up over your nose. I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but this is how you can start the conversation. Use this as a way to open a door and talk to people possibly about laboratory animal research. Get them used to the whole idea that, you know what? Vectors aren't just something that applies in math, okay? In geometry. Vectors is something that happens when we're talking about disease transmission as well. Explain to them how they have to be wearing their mask properly and how washing hands properly is important. And explain to them the whole idea of circles and so forth. Because this is something that people are hearing about right now, but we can still use it as a way to possibly start talking about laboratory animal research. If you do that, maybe you're going to come up with your own list of 3 questions that people have about what it is that we do. But the one thing that can't be argued is that people need to know what we do so they can ask those appropriate questions, and we can let people know the true importance of laboratory animal research. And at that point, I will actually open it up to see if anyone has any questions at all. If so, unmute yourself, please, and just go ahead and shout it out. Okay, well, with no actual questions, does anyone have anything they want to contribute at all? Do you have anything you want to say about outreach that you've done or that you'd want to do?
With calls for more transparency, we realize we need to earn trust more.
Just that if it's interested, the AALAS Foundation has a lot of resources, as does the Americans for Medical Progress, FBR. There's a number of organizations that help you with information, and the AALAS Foundation even has presentations already done. I think they even set out some guidance that you can request on virtual presentations on how to do outreach locally, maybe to a school, maybe an area program of your own someday after COVID. Or something like that. So there's tons of resources out there. And I know Gordon has helped me out several times as a resource as well on how to present and whatnot.
I was actually just checking out the Americans for Medical Progress session that they have on the at the conference. I was looking at that just before. I haven't had a chance to finish watching it, but I certainly plan on doing it. Sarah wants to know if you can see Sugar. Let me see if she's around. Hey, Sugar. Hey, sweetie.
Going into the Can you guys hear me?
I can, Paula.
I just wanted to thank you so much, Gordon. That was fantastic. And you're brilliant with the presentations in the background. I have to learn how to do that. I just wanted to say, you know, I love to hear other people talking about this topic. I am so happy to hear you and others sort of really encourage others to talk about what they do. I mean, the points that you shared in helping people make that connection between animal research and patient stories is so important. So hopefully if anybody on the call here is not talking about what you do, it's not like the old days. I was there too when I started as a vet tech. It's like, don't talk about what you do. And that didn't sit with me for very long either. So yeah, there's lots of resources out there. Those AALAS presentations are fantastic because they're focused on specific diseases like heart disease or cancer. So if you're a patient or a person who's experienced any of those diseases, that's a really nice way to tell your personal story with like resources that are already developed. And then of course, AMP is always here to help, and other groups, as Sarah mentioned, have awesome resources as well. So thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you for that, Paula. I really do appreciate it. And by the way, this is Sugar, who was retired from a research facility here in Montreal, and she's just the sweetest little girl. So I'll put her down here. As far as what Paula was saying, yeah, one of the best things you can do for a connection with people is let them know about the research that's going on in your facility. Let them know about what you do specifically, because again, that personal connection between you and them is what's going to inform them and help to open their eyes. So if you can make it something relative to what you do, that's great. As far as presentations go, I will actually have another seminar going on tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. if anyone wants to tune in for that. We're going to talk about public speaking and presenting style a bit, including what I've been doing here with the virtual backgrounds and stuff like that, integrating with PowerPoint
Awesome.
and those things. Yeah, so
that would be great.
Tomorrow 10 a.m. same time, well, different time, same channel. So.
Hey, Gord, it's Vinny. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, sir.
I just had something I wanted to share, a personal experience. You were talking about initially with outreach and being told not to talk about what you do. And some of you may have heard this story, but when I started in May of '91 in the industry, as an animal tech, and then I became a vet tech after a few months. So I was a Bristol Myers Squibb out in Connecticut, and I had a blowout in my car, so I was getting a tire replaced. And they always said, don't talk to people about what you do. And I always thought that was kind of strange because I felt like we didn't have anything to hide. I also worked at a pet store and in a vet clinic. And I always told people, if you want to see mistreatment and abuse, work in a pet store or work in a vet clinic, because people bring their dog in 6 months after it should have been euthanized. So, you know, I kind of had that perspective, but I'd forgotten to take my badge off, and it said veterinary sciences. So I'm sitting there, and there's a woman in the full garb, the purple hair, the meat is murder, and no offense to anybody, but she was decked out, and her car had, you know, all the stickers on it, you know, animal rights, everything else. And she's sitting next to me, and she looks over and sees my badge. And she's like, oh, and I go, uh-oh, here we go. And so she says, you're one of those. So I basically turned it around on her. I was very polite. And I said, well, you know, why don't you tell me what I do when I go to work every day? And she couldn't. So I got into a discussion with her for about 15 minutes. I explained, you know, my experience, my perspective, being an animal lover. I explained everything from dietary enrichment to social enrichment to environmental enrichment. Even talked about, you know, our primates. She knew we had primates, talking about how they had cable TV and play cages and socialization. And she was taking her mother for chemotherapy. So I lost a number of family members, but I basically gave her some insight into some of the research that we were doing. Everything from virology to oncology. And, you know, within a couple minutes from that, she was hugging me and she was crying. She had no idea. And it ended up being a really good interaction. And when I went back to work and I told my director about it, at first she was taken aback. Then afterwards, you know, she quickly realized that, you know, it was the right opportunity to present it in a positive way. And it worked out well. So
Yeah,
I couldn't hide behind my badge.
I think
That's
you're exactly
fantastic,
right.
Vinny.
Thank you.
Yeah, Vinny, I think you're exactly right that you have to engage with those people when the opportunity does appropriately present itself. That does mean if you're at a conference and you've got protesters outside, that isn't the right opportunity. All right, don't go and put yourself into those types of positions. It's just generally not a good idea. If you're going to tell someone who's serving you food about what you do, wait until you get the food before you tell them what it is that you do. Those types of things. It's very true.
Just building on that, I found as I talk to people one-on-one, a lot of them may not remember everything you say, but they will remember how much you care, and if you make it personal.
Agreed. I had a neighbor when I lived in Pennsylvania that moved in with like pigs she rescued and everything. And by the time I moved to New York, she was like, I like research because I see that you love animals because you helped me with my crazy pigs.
Biggest compliment I ever got is when I worked for the University of Southern Maine. We had somebody working in the research administration office who did IRB work, so the human subject side. But she also helped out with Cook on occasion. And she once told me, this is one of the biggest compliments, she was a vegan, rescued every animal you could possibly meet. I don't think she's maybe quite as extreme as the one Vinny met, but the biggest compliment I ever got, she said, I don't ever worry about the animals here because I know you're the one working with them.
Yes, exactly. This is why, you know, they often say, what was her name? Her name is escaping me right now, but one of her famous quotes was, people will forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And this is exactly what we're talking about here, is making the connection with people. They might not remember the stories that you tell them about working laboratory animal research, but they'll remember that you made them feel good and comfortable about what research is. So we can go ahead and we can build off that. And again, just let people realize that it's not what they think it is, and that it's so much more and so much better.
I think I just wanted to jump in and mention one thing too, that I think it helps to, depending on where you are, if you're in a university or a big company, to kind of start where you are to talk to people about it, because even people within your own group, your own company may not know about it. And so it really helps to start having those conversations at that level, explaining how it's benefiting the whole institution that you're in. And it's a nice way to get used to talking about it in, you know, somewhat of a friendly environment before you have to talk to people that are totally outside of it. But, you know, you'd be surprised at how many people don't know that research is going on in their own company.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, where you do have to play your own balancing game here is that, of course, some institutions, it isn't just a policy, it's actually a regulation that you can't talk about these things. So you have to be careful not to cross those lines, of course. But I'll leave that to everyone's own best judgment. You know, just be smart about it.